discussions on topics affecting Hawaii's youth, Ohana, and community.
Aloha mai kako, and welcome to another episode of Kukakuka. I'm Venus Rossetti Medeiros, and I am the president and CEO of Hale Kipa, and we mahalo you for joining us once again. I have three beautiful ladies here to join me in our talk story today on our Malama Ohana initiative. What is Malama Ohana initiative? Well, let me start with Delia Ulima, who is the High Hopes Initiative Manager, to talk a little bit about what she does and how we all started into how we evolved into this Malama Ohana initiative. Kylene Nihipali Sanchez is also joining us. She is our Nakama Ahaloa Manager. And of course, Laurie Tochiki, who is our Executive Director for Epic Ohana. So all three of these women will be kind of taking us on a journey to where we started and where we are today and where we hope to be in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Delia right now. Delia, tell us a little bit about High Hopes. And then, of course, High Hopes is part of Epic Ohana, right?
Absolutely. First and foremost, congratulations on this amazing show. Mahalo, Venus, for having us on Kukakuka. We love to talk story with you. And thank you for the good work you do at Hale Kipa and what Hale Kipa does in the community. We're so honored to be here today. The High Hopes Initiative, so I've been with Epic Ohana for almost 15 years. And the High Hopes Initiative, High Hope stands for Hawaii, helping our people envision success. So long
so it's
acronym.
an acronym.
It is both the High and the Hopes.
Oh, try again?
Hawaii, so HI, helping our people envision success.
Wow.
And the young people came up with that name. They came up with the name. So what it is our opportunity to engage young people who've been involved in the foster care system. They are advocates, they're educators, they're collaborators, and utilize the youth voice and partnership, youth-adult partnership. They inform and transform the foster care system by improving policy and practice, and of course, touching and changing hearts and minds. So how High Hopes kind of ties into our discussion today about Malama Ohana is our High Hopes initiative started in 2010. We're the local site of the National Annie E. Casey Foundation, Jim Casey Initiative. So these big names that do great philanthropy across the continental United States. Jim Casey was the founder of UPS, and Annie E. Casey is his mother's name, and started this foundation in the 60s. They've influenced federal law at Congress, many sites improving their foster care systems, and we became a partner here in Hawaii in 2010. So that's a little bit about the historical context of High Hopes.
Now, I used to work for a program that was funded by the Marguerite Casey.
So that's a Casey cousin.
Okay.
They call themselves a Casey cousin. So Annie Casey is the mothership, if you will, and is the mother, Annie E. So Jim Casey Initiative, of which we're part of, focused on adolescent and young people aging out of the foster care system. And he's the founder of UPS. His sister's Marguerite.
Oh, okay.
And so there's Marguerite Foundation, Casey Family Programs based out of the Northwest. And then Annie E. Casey Foundation is now out of Baltimore. So they're all called the Casey cousins. They're all related. So very cool.
Awesome.
But yeah, with that work, how it ties into Malama Ohana and Nakama Ahaloa, which you'll hear Kylene speak about, is the ability to work with those with lived expertise, young people in the system, and also acknowledging the fact that Native Hawaiians, families, children, and youth are overrepresented in the foster care system.
Yeah.
So how to address that issue, and that really kind of was the genesis of what is now Nakama Ahaloa and Malama Ohana.
So, Delia, I have met some of your youth leaders, and they are awesome.
They're amazing.
If any of you get a chance to, work with any young person in this human development, human service field, I tell you, and you need a young person.
Yes.
Please tap into Delia at Epic Ohana and ask for one of their youth leaders, because they come in with such passion, expertise, and they can give a voice to our young people, you know, and where they're coming from and what's important to them.
Yes.
So mahalo for the work that you do in really helping our young people be able to share their voices.
It's an honor to work with them. And again, they represent a model of really what our community should be striving to do, which is to not just learn from, but partner for systems reform and solutions to these complex community issues, those with lived expertise, including young people in systems.
Yeah, you know, it's funny kind of like how we in Hawaii, well, especially like our decision makers around foster care, right? Sometimes we think we know all the answers. And we don't take the time to really listen to those who are being impacted the most.
Absolutely.
Which is our keiki, right? And our opio. And so having this outlet and this organization really embrace our young people and giving voice to their expertise around that, right? Is so important. So mahalo for that. Now, Kylene, Nihipali Sanchez from the west side. Share a little bit about Nakama Ahaloa. What is Nakama Ahaloa?
So Nakama Ahaloa is a network. You know, as Delia shared, it's a network filled with partners, different partners that we work with. But basically what happened is around 2018, the disproportionality that Delia was talking about, right, with Native Hawaiians in the child welfare system was, you know, there was a conversation about what do we do with that? You know, what happens? And so a group of partners with Laurie folks and a couple others, you were there from the beginning, I know Stacy folks, and came together, right, and said, how can we address this? What can we do with this? There was some process going through looking at, you know, what we call critical shifts, what our current state is, what our future state should look like, and really coming up with the dream and goal on what we want to do and what can we do together, not just siloed, right? As a network, all of us working with Native Hawaiian families and communities, what can we do to decrease that disproportionality? So we have a goal, right? You know, we want to make sure that not only are we doing that work, but we're reaching those milestones. So our goal is by 2030 to decrease that disproportionality, which right now, even though our families or Native Hawaiian children make up about anywhere between like 25-30% of the state, right, of all the children in the state, we're about 43-44% in the child welfare system. So really looking at what can we do and bringing everybody together to see the different viewpoints, to live the experience is huge a part of that, right? To be able to have our youth and our parents who have been a part of that, our resource caregivers that are able to share that and everyone come together between Kipa, we have Kumeme schools, you know, DHS, you know, child welfare, everybody talking together instead of separate, talking together to see what we can really do to change this and what that looks like. And I believe it was our April 2022. So what we do is we have 2 convenings each year, and we come together and we talk story, we look at what we can do, and then we had Hui, or initiative teams that came out of that to really address certain things with Hui Makua, with our parents. We had Hui Kauhale that looked at like, what does that training look like, you know, for those involved. And in our April 2022 convening, Venus came into the convening after a Civil Beat article that came out, and I remember with your phone going, we need to do something. And really, Malama Ohana came out of that. Came out of all the conversations with everybody there. We were at the Vai Vai Collective, and everyone was talking story and saying, what can we do, right? What is that next step? And I know Laurie will talk a little bit more about that, but that's kind of where the idea of Malama Ohana came out of, and took, you know, some time to get there, but here we are now to really being able to say, you know, what can we do? What does that look like? And let's hear all the different perspectives and all the different sides so we can truly do better with Native Hawaiian values and Pilina at the forefront for our families.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kylene. And yes, I remember the gathering, Laurie, and you know, really looking at where we want to be, right? And looking at the disproportionality. And when you look at why do we have so many Native Hawaiian children and families impacted by the foster care system. And I want to read this statistic for all of you. For Native Hawaiian keiki under 18 in the state of Hawaii, there are 101,096 Native Hawaiians under the age of 18 in Hawaii, accounting for only 7% of the total state population, and 33.2% of the total population under the age of 18. And what Kylene had mentioned, looking at that number, how's this? In 2021, 45% of all of our young people that's in the foster care system were Hawaiian. Now, we're looking at this year, right, or 2021. However, if you go back 10 years, go back 15 years, we have always been, Native Hawaiian children have always been at the top of the number of young people in the system. It's been Native Hawaiians. We've just been paying attention more in the last 5-6 years because we're tired of seeing that, right? Like, why is that? When you have a island, a state who prides itself on Ohana, right? Native Hawaiians, one of their top values is Ohana, aloha, Malama, right? To love, to care for, to cherish. And yet, why is it that our Native Hawaiian children are at the top of that disproportionality of young people in the system? There's a number of reasons why. And this is what we're creating this Malama Ohana initiative to address. The why and no more. Nakama Ahaloa has done some great work. There's a website, right, that people can go on to learn more about Nakama Ahaloa.
Yes, we're on the Epic Ohana website. If you look under the programs, and then
Tell the community where they can go.
We are on our Epic Ohana website. If you look on under the programs, it has our information. It also under resources and media, some videos and everything, and the families that we've worked in, and some of the great work that has really come out, and really transformative work, right? Putting youth and parents' voice right there. We, out of Huikau Hale, we're able to do child welfare services now for our new hires. We're able to do Native Hawaiian perspectives and values training, which has come such a far way from when I was at child welfare. We didn't have that part, right? And just really being able to work with and see, you know, those that are working with our family, see the changes, see what just a 6 to 8 hour, you know, presentation and training can do for the next 6 to 8 months that they're working with these families. Just so impactful and powerful, and really seeing those changes happening.
So, you know, you talked about the different hui, right? So the different committee groups. So you're talking about many people kind of coming in and working towards this goal of seeing this transformation happen in child welfare, right? With child welfare themselves at the table.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the different committees. Can you share a little bit about what came out of each one of those committees? Maybe Delia, you can talk about our hui pilina.
Sure, of course. So, and I just want to really quickly go back. So the website is epicohana.org or epicohana.org. I believe the Malama Ohana is malamaohana.net.
Yes.
It's a different website.
Although
Yes, but it's
but
connected.
there's a link.
Yeah, there's a link. So even if you go to epicohana.org, the Malama Ohana page is there. But if you type in malamaohana.net, it will take you to that same
Okay,
page.
cool.
So just wanted to put that up if they throw it up at the bottom of the screen at some point. Okay, so the hui, right? It was important at the very beginning, at the outset of this work, with the creation of Nakama Ahaloa, to identify where, if you were to put, so the community partners came together, and they talked about if you were to put your energies towards particular areas of this issue, right, and kind of move the needle a little bit, where would you want to put it? And so there are certain hui or groups that were set up to address what that original group said let's start here, right? So everything is iterative, right? It changes, it transforms with time. See, Venus, me and you, I like talk story with my hands, just like you.
I know.
You're on your hands. I'm trying not to
I'm
hit
trying to
holding your
hold it.
hand,
microphones,
holding it tight.
but I like to move, but we all, that's how we talk story.
You know, when
right?
people want to make me be quiet, they just hold my hands.
It's almost cruel to, I can't even imagine someone holding your hand, Venus, like that, just to, stop you from talking. But anyway, Hui Pilina was one of those core groups that actually is the only hui that still exists today from the original one.
What does pilina mean?
So pilina in Olelo, Hawaii, or in Hawaiian, refers to a close relationship, right? Something that's binding, right? Unseverable relationship. But in its simplest terms, we utilize the term pilina to talk about close-knit relationships with someone or something, right? And so the hui pilina focused on sibling connections, because when young people are in foster care, we know from national statistics that about 70% of all children who enter foster care have at least one sibling that also enter into foster care at some point in time with them or at some point in their experience. And they can often be separated. So maybe they're a large sibling group and there's not a home that can take all of them together. So that sibling group will get separated. It's particularly difficult if they do not have kin placement. So if an uncle or auntie or grandparent is unable to become the temporary, what we now refer to as resource caregiver or foster parents, which is what this community is used to hearing that term, then they will go to licensed workers. And so Hui Pilina really looks at how do we keep sibling groups together, or if they have to be separated in homes, how do we keep them connected regularly?
And some don't know that at times when siblings cannot be placed, or a young person, they end up at Hale Kipa in one of our shelters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not ideal. And so, what's ideal, of course, first and foremost, is for all of our families and children to have safe homes and to have the support they need to thrive. And then, of course, if at any point in time they have to enter into a system like foster care, that they are with family first, placed with family until they can safely return home to parents or their caregivers. But, our young people, they've identified this as one of their top priorities, that they want to be able to stay connected with their siblings while they're in care. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't see them for weeks or months at a time.
That's right. And so sad, right?
Yeah.
Now, Hui Pilina did come up with an outcome, though, in your gathering together, meeting. What was a product that came out of Hui Pilina?
Yeah, so we work with young people, with our community partners, and some of the things that the Hui Pilina group came up with, or one of the outcomes, is the creation of a curriculum, a training for social workers, judges, foster parents, community leaders, to understand how they can keep young people connected in care. So, and that's actually, that 1 hour training is available on our Epic Ohana YouTube channel. And it's called the Hui Pilina Training, or Pilini. So with training, video, we also came up with, we're working on a sibling connections guide, actually with the department, that hopefully this year will come out, that's comprehensive. And it will have the stamp of approval from the department that kind of says, this is our stance on keeping siblings together, and this is how we can do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, there's also more hui, hui makua. Who would like to speak on hui makua?
I can.
Okay.
I can.
And then we'll hear more from Laurie, but for now, can you tell us what is hui makua and what was some of the outcomes?
Sure. So what we did was, we looked at all the critical shifts, right? And so this is how the situation is now, and if we do have better outcomes for Native Hawaiian children, what do we need to shift? So for hui makua referring to parents, we said, if the voices of the parents, those with lived experience as birth parents, could be heard, and if we could provide support in the form of peer support, that means somebody who's got lived experience in that same journey, who can walk alongside someone else that's now in that journey, that it could be so powerful just like with the youth, because the voices of our young people in High Hopes has changed the system. It has done incredible things in lifting up those voices, and people listen. So Hui Makua set about to first build a small cadre of parents with lived experience who can walk alongside other parents. And while they're doing that, also learn how to do the kind of strategic sharing that our young people do, and help the system understand what are the needs of parents, what does it feel like, and how might the system serve them better. And so as a result, we did build a small cadre. That small cadre has gone on to do some amazing work in speaking to the system, in making changes. For instance, there's a guidebook on our website for other parents about, if you are in this situation, what does this law mean? How do you navigate it? In the one-to-one work, right now we have Makua Allies that works with mothers who are either before they have the baby or after they have the baby, but are experiencing substance use disorder. So it's a very, very challenging situation for those mothers and for the baby, very dangerous for the baby. And so a Makua Ally is somebody with lived experience who can walk alongside and say, there's hope. And so very exciting work. And again, if you go to our website, there's an amazing video called Keep Showing Up that has the voices of the parents, helping other parents to navigate the system successfully.
I love that, yeah. Now, Hui Kauhale is another hui that's part of Nakama. You want to talk a little bit about Hui Kauhale?
I was letting you go.
Okay.
No,
You're part of,
yes,
you
yes.
were part
You
of
were
it.
from
You should
Venus.
talk about Hui
Venus.
Kauhale.
Okay, well, Hui Kauhale is really about what happened is when we came together, there was a couple of things that we're looking at is really creating like that safe place for our families to feel comfortable, where they could go to their case manager or their social worker and they would feel like they could be understood. And so one of the things that we wanted to focus on is really to train our social workers that's part of child welfare on some of the values, some of the belief systems of traditionally our Native Hawaiian Ohana, our families, some of the things that our keiki go through. So we thought that was really important for many of their social workers who are coming into this field, not really knowing the culture that well. We thought this would be a great thing to provide for them. So one of the outcomes is we have a training now that's offered to any new social worker that's working with child welfare. They go through that whole training. So it's a new employee training. We also created one for caregivers. So those who are wanting to foster young people who are part Native Hawaiian, that they would also go through that training. What else do we have? I think those were the two main trainings. But since then, we've had many requests, or as Laurie wants to put it, gigs. We're plenty gigs now, where
Plenty
people are
gigs.
asking us to come and train their staff at their organization. And so we've been able to do that as well.
And can I just add, Venus? I think one of the biggest things that Delia and I get to facilitate the trainings, and one of the stories that always hits me is that we had a supervisor that was on from the continent, and she sat in, and you never really know, right? Because you're behind Zoom, behind the screen, and she was working with a family that I got to work with, and 3 weeks after we had the training, the family called me. Mom called me, and I was in a meeting, and her message, she was crying. She's like, please call me back. And I was like, oh no, right? So I called her back, and she was crying because she said it was the first time in her 3 years at child welfare that she felt like a human being, that the supervisor came and talked to her, and it was like past almost 3 hours, and she's like, okay, I have to go. And she's like, but we didn't even talk about the case. And the supervisor said, that's not what I was here for. I was here to really learn about you and your family, which makes that difference in the services that are requested or just in trying to set that family up for success when she took that extra time, right? Instead of saying, okay, I'm coming in, I'm going to do this, she took that time. Because from that, she also took the time to learn so much about the family that there were some concerns about one of their children, and she said, that's not a concern, that's a cultural piece, that's huge, and she wanted to learn more about it. So really just being able to see those shifts from the things that we're sharing, just that basic, as Delia was sharing with the word pilina, just that shift when we take the time to truly know one another, know ourselves, right? And know what we show up and then how we show up. And then being able to work with our families side by side with them, right? Not saying, well, it's this and that, because what works in Waianae is different from what works in Waipio Valley to Ohana to Anahola. It's all different. So being able to really work with our families and communities to truly set them up for success.
Yeah, like that saying, right? Seek first to be
Yes.
to understand, then to be understood, right? To really put yourself in that Ohana's shoes or the slippers, right?
And it changes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started in this field, and it was like you gotta go your first few days of onboarding for your new job is learning the 30-page assessment tool that you have to go and go into a home and have them fill out, right? Or all the 101 questions you have to ask this family. And then you think, how invasive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know you, and I'm supposed to pour out my heart to you? Like, why don't you get to know me first? And that's so cultural, right? Who you?
Well, so you went.
Where you belong. Yeah. Who you connected to. What high school you graduated from. Right? All those things that's so part of our culture is get to know me first. I want to get to know you first. And then maybe, I can spill my guts to you, but not right now. I don't even know you. So just that kind of stuff, getting someone to understand the way we do things in Hawaii is different, right? Culturally.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about Native Hawaiian, we're talking about local, right? Our local way of doing business here is very different.
And even just responding to things, right? We don't, as Hawaiians and other cultures, we don't just answer for ourselves, right? Like when we're answering for those who came before us, for those who are here now, and those who are to come later. So it takes a lot of that thought, right? We really have to think that
kuleana
through.
now.
We have kuleana in all spaces,
Yeah.
and really being being knowledgeable of that and knowing that and being okay with that. That I might not get an answer from you right now, but I'm gonna get one once you're able to get all the spaces together.
Right. Okay, so we covered 3 huis. I know there's a couple more.
Well, so there were 2 kind of related, one in Hilo and one here, that was really looking at how might we create more strength for the resource caregivers, or formerly known as foster parents. And especially, what are some ways where it doesn't have to be a battle between the foster parent and the birth parent? What if instead of, the termination of rights or the new parent or whatever, that they work together? So it's called shared parenting, ways that resource caregivers and birth parents can really become extended family to one another and support the children in that they have in commmen. So
I
really
love that
looking for that
video.
ways.
Yeah, you guys have that video that is so powerful.
It's our keiki, our kuleana, and it's very, very powerful. Jamie Miller is the voice in the Olelo.
Commentating.
Yeah.
What is the name again, and where can they see that?
So again, our YouTube channel, the epicohana.org YouTube channel, if you go to media, I think there's a whole bunch of videos. And so this one is called, I think it's called Our Keiki, Our Kuleana.
Yeah, it's really, please go on that and check that out. It really gives value to both sides, right? And how, for the sake of our keiki, right? Nona kamali'i, for the sake of our young people, you know, we have to put aside our differences and come together, right? Like co-parenting.
Yes.
Because the reality is, Venus, and particularly for the young people, this is something I learned in working with the young people is when they exit the system, the majority of them are going back home to the place that perhaps they were taken out of, and maybe even their parents' rights were legally terminated. But they will return to that ohana very often, or their extended ohana. And so better if at the front end, you're working with the family and extended family to see where there might be natural supports that are still safe and appropriate, right? And so the concept of the shared parenting, that it doesn't have to be adversarial, that you have the temporary parents, if you will. And we know that in our Hawaiian culture, we had the concept of different parenting. Po'olua, we had we had hanai and luhi, different concepts, right? That we came together to malama, and we didn't just separate. And that's one of the difficult things about a Western system like foster care or even the criminal justice system. The first thing you do is separate, as opposed to bring people together to help to heal or to support. And so that's the beautiful thing about coming together and including the parents that are often vilified. And yes, there's not to say that there's not some horrific incidences of abuse. We know, and we understand that. But you know, almost 67%, I think it's in this, if not this, or the data book that came out from 2021, which is available online, the Department of Human Services, are really investigations around negligence, negligence, like did they eat enough, their clothes dirty, they come in school. And so a lot of it is tied to poverty. So now there's a concept of communities and families that might come from poverty, right, or low income or other sorts of challenges being surveyed. So a higher level of surveillance. So when you can address community issues around supporting those families who might be experiencing homelessness or being houseless, maybe they are dealing with substance abuse disorder or even domestic violence. If we can support those families, then we're supporting the children and not just separating them or that rift that might impact them throughout the entirety of their lives, because they will go back home to their ohana.
Absolutely. And you know, we want them to be able to go back home. That's the thing, right? I mean, no one is going to love them, right, as much as the parents who birthed them, who really, really want to care for them, but maybe lack certain skills, maybe knowledge, or the resources that they're needing. So why not support them, right? Why not? And so I know from Nakama Ahaloa, okay, we're going to move on. So Nakama Ahaloa started, we broke into these different hui groups, we did some work, and now it was time for us to look at now what, right? The now what. So I'm going to turn it over to Laurie, who is the executive director of Epic Ohana, because really, I tell you, so Laurie's like my Batman, and I'm the Robin, okay? Because we're kind of like two peas in a pod. We think a lot alike. She's a lot more, I would say, gracious, I would gracious in doing things. I'm a little bit more, but Laurie, could you explain how Malama Ohana came out of Nakama Ahaloa? Sure. I know Kylene touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you think about what we've done with Nakama Ahaloa, which is, you know, it takes all of us together.
Right.
And our child welfare system, I've been working in this system for 44 years now, and there's so much blame, right? So families are hurting. There's bad things happening in families. You know, they're struggling with domestic violence, substance use disorder, poverty. And so there's help that's needed. But we have this really kind of cumbersome system. And then in addition to being cumbersome, we blame each other. And, you know, I always say, my grandpa taught me, if you point a finger at somebody, 3 fingers come back at you. What we learn in Nakama is that collectively, the community agencies, EPIC, Hale Kipa, Catholic Charities, you know, all of us, but also the people with lived experience, the parents, the kin, the family, the resource caregivers, and the youth. Our voices together with the department we can find the solutions. We can find the solutions that have heart, that are respectful and wise. And so we were in our convening, we were at the Vai Collective. Venus comes in with her phone and she's like, we have to do something. And really the thought was this collective action that we have been growing together, embracing one another, working with government. Government cannot fix all these problems. Right. Cannot. It's not equipped to. Government's not a very good parent, right? It's not meant to be a parent.
No,
so,
never.
So
Right.
working together, and yes, we care deeply about the needs of the Native Hawaiian children, and the reconnection to culture, the reconnection to place is really, really important. It's also important for all of the children of Hawaii.
Right.
And for instance, I'm not a Native Hawaiian. My family is from the plantation, right? We've been here for generations. But some of those same concepts, Hanai in our family, Luhi in our family, connection to ancestors, connection to faith and to culture is really important. So Venus comes in and she says, we got to do this. So we in this process, it's called ideation. You create ideas together in a fun kind of way. And so that day we created a Malama Ohana working group. We had the concept. We drafted it out. What would this working group do? Well, we would bring together, similar to Nakama, all the different sectors, but especially the people with lived experience, including the social workers. And I point to Kylene because she was a social worker with child welfare, because they're hurting too. They are amazing, strong, hardworking people who have to face such tragedy and difficulty. So we got to work together, right? So we drafted this thing. We went to see at that time. Representative Sylvia Luke was the finance committee, and we said, Venus and I showed up in her office, and we said, here's an idea.
Very brave.
We were brave. We sat outside and we talked to Queen Liliuokalani first.
Yeah, we went to go see the Queen first for her blessing.
But just really, we need solutions. This isn't something you just throw money at. Because, money would help, but, it really is, it has to be that the solutions come from the community. So it didn't, it passed, but there were some technical problems with that bill that year. And so in 2023, we went there again. Venus and I showed up at the legislature, and so did many young people, many voices from the community, people who kept saying, we can find solutions here. Let us come up with the solutions. So it passed, was signed by the governor in June or July. Unfortunately, it passed without funding, but we're very, very grateful for funding from Kamehameha Schools, from the Caseys, from Annie E. Casey family, from the Hawaii Community Foundation. Just, really wonderful community-based support for the work. We gathered our group of 17 people, some from agencies. So, there's a representation from the Native Hawaiian community because of the overrepresentation. So from Liliuokalani Trust, Kamehameha Schools, and OHA, from the Department of Human Services, and from community-based organizations, Department of Health. And so we've been convening now.
And we have a high representation of lived experience.
Yes. Of the 17, 8 individuals have lived experience. 10 if you count the ones who worked with the department. Yes.
And there are some of us who have lived experience, but we're not claiming that.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. It's actually more than a majority. That's right. In many different roles as resource caregivers.
So what's the working group doing, Laurie? Like what's our charge?
So Venus and I are co-chairs, and our charge is first to go out there and listen. to go out there and talk to people, to go out there and ask people for their wisdom. And so in our meetings, each meeting we've had presentations from different groups, but now we are going out, and so we have committees for different stakeholder groups, and each committee will come up with a list of who do we need to talk to, what communities do we need to go to visit, where do we need to go maybe to have some open forums, but maybe also for small group conversations. So that's the next phase, is going out there and listening, coming up with the solutions that people have in their hearts.
And are we doing this statewide?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely statewide. Especially, the concerns are very similar across the state, but also very different in different communities. There are some communities that have more resources, and other communities that have very few resources, especially to address things like substance use disorder or domestic violence,
Mental health.
mental
right?
health, very, very important, or even poverty and unemployment, right? In different
Yes.
communities, physical health, medical assistance in different communities are different. So we intend to go out to every community, and we also really need people to come to us. So in our website, there's a place where you can go and you can put your ideas in. You can also say, hey, I want to participate. So even though there's a working group, it's very much a community of people talking with one another to find solutions. On July 15th, we are going to gather an even larger group of people from the community. We'll share what we've learned, and then we'll ask the entire community, anybody who wants to come, to help us to formulate the recommendations that will go to the legislature for the 2025 legislative session. So that's our
How
work for
exciting,
this
like-
year.
Yeah, so we're going to be jamming, right? We're going to be like
we're gonna busy.
working very diligently in getting all the voices together, transcribing that, and coming up with some recommendations to
Yes.
submit.
So One Shared Future is our administrative facilitator. It's an organization founded and led by Rachel Wong, who used to be the director of the Department of Human Services. And they're going to do things like, our notes will be graphic, and so we'll put it up in pictures, and we'll gather and have these discussions. I'm excited about it.
I am too. And so the whole goal is to transform our child welfare system, right? That would better serve the needs of our families, our Ohana and our Keiki, right? As well as the department themselves,
Together.
right?
And Venus, thank you for having us, but more than anything, thank you for your partnership. Having all of the community organizations and the people with lived experience willing. This is hard stuff.
This is hard stuff.
And like I said, a lot of blame. So we have to be brave in our sharing. People are hurt. People are upset because our children are at stake, right? So
Right.
when you, So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And you guys
Batman,
too.
Robin, Batman.
So, we're
Can
at
we
a
be
place.
like the Green Hornet? Or
Yeah.
somehow, or like,
I get this.
we want to join.
We're gonna make our own.
Or Wonder Woman, maybe.
Wonder Woman. Ninja, some kind
So-
of ninja thing.
One of the things is we are beyond working in silos. We cannot.
Yes.
Right? Those days are over. We really do, Laurie. I totally resonate with what you're saying. We got to join hands, right? We have to work together for the sake of our kids. Because when we don't, they suffer,
Yes.
right? It's our community who suffers when we don't. So, put aside our differences. And in fact, we don't really have that many differences. It's really about acknowledging and recognizing the good that each organization brings to the table, right? You guys do it a little bit different. You work with children in foster care, so do we, right? We also work at Imua Kauko, how we help our young people to get out of the system as they're what's the right word?
Transitioning.
Yeah,
Transitioning. Moving to adulthood.
transitioning.
Yeah.
out of the foster care system into their own, adult life.
And by the way, it was because of the work of the High Hopes Board, in concert with Child Welfare and the Ledge, that Imua Kako came to be. There would be no Imua Kako, which is with the name of the Extended Voluntary Foster Care to age 21, right, program. So there would be no Imua Kako without the High Hopes Board working hand in hand with the Department of Human Services, with the legislators, with our partners in the community, with our national partners that came in with support to show what other states had been doing. And because of that, in 2013, that was signed into law, and we became, I want to say, the 12th or 13th state to pass extended voluntary foster care, which the young people renamed Imua Kako, which Hale Kipa has a contract on Oahu for that program for the 18 to 21-year-olds to make sure that they're coming out of care and they're getting the support they need for a successful young adult life.
And this is so important. I mean, how many of you out there were ready to start your life at 18 years old? And even when, we have stable households, it's still kind of scary going out there on your own at 18, right? Now imagine someone coming out of foster care and thinking, where do I go? Like at 18, right? If my caregiver says, okay, you're 18, you're out on your own, where do I go? What do I do? Where's my support? So I'm glad that they advocated for that, right? So it gives them that period of transitioning into adulthood and partners in play to really work to support those young people.
You know,
So-
when the young people were advocating for Imua Kako, we, in partnership with Annie E. Casey, did a fiscal study. So that's when these economics and people who can crunch numbers came up with a study about if we invest in these young people who, unfortunately, without help, may end up are more likely, or the statistics are harsher about becoming incarcerated or having children maybe before they're ready or not completing college. If we invest in them, the return on the dollar is tremendous. So it's a wise investment for the state, and so that's what happened, and it's also funded by the federal government. And I think that's also what we're talking about from Malama Ohana, that investing in the well-being of the families and investing in the well-being of the children and helping, it just makes economic sense too.
Right. I mean, goes back to anytime you can invest in prevention
Yes.
of anything,
Yes.
right? It's so worthwhile financially, right? Also the collateral damage, right, that happens
Yes.
when you don't. I mean, I think, if we can just get decision makers to understand that, how important it is, right? I mean, it's one thing to do treatment. Of course, we need to, like how you said earlier, there's times when we do have to take children away from families who are being abusive, neglectful. But for the most part, if we can work with that family, right? So even if you have to luhi the child for a little bit, right? Take them away temporarily while their parents work on getting the skills and the behaviors together to provide a safe and nurturing home for the child, do that so that the child can come back, right?
I just want to say that, we've been talking about a number of reasons why this is good for our community to come together to collaborate. So there's definitely the fiscal purposes, there's cost avoidance, right? That young person or that family that you're helping now, they're less likely to, as Lori mentioned, maybe become incarcerated or be more reliant on welfare for a longer duration of time. They're able to go back to school. They're able to contribute a little more to the society and be on their own, or be independent or interdependent, if you will. So there's the fiscal sense that it makes, but more importantly, the fabric of our society and our community, right? What it does to heal generational trauma and generational poverty, right? And when we're talking about the most vulnerable of our society, our community, these families, for example, that are involved in the foster care system, they're not just involved in the foster care system. They're very often families that are also involved in the criminal justice system, or maybe have become houseless or homeless, or involved with so we have different communities that might be focused on one issue, but it's the same family, or it's the same child, because those kids go to school in the DOE system. So we have the DOE system, we have the DHS system with the DOH, Department of Health, and we have other systems as well. So if we're helping the least of these, the most vulnerable, we're actually helping multiple systems, and the multiplier effect is amazing.
And I think when I think about when we grew up, because I think it's safe to say we all grew up without cell phones, right? And in that time, really, sorry, we're aging ourselves. But but still, I remember like skipping school, and everybody in my community knew. By the time I got home, right, everybody knew where I was and whatnot, because it was that community empowerment, right, of caring for one another. And there's been a disconnect in that for a little bit. And being able to, I see Malama Ohana as that space where, we always hear, I didn't know about the disproportionality, I didn't know about this, but we know now. So let's hear what works for people, what's not worked. How can we, besides hearing those things that didn't work, right? Because there is that hurt. What did work? Because if that worked for you, how can we use that to enhance this family in the same community, or this family in a similar community? What can we do together and really empower our communities to be able to be there for our families and for each other? I know I have 3 kids. I counted everybody. Everybody on my street knows when we need something or whatnot, right? And think about every other family that we work on, each street that we live on. If we knew what was needed or how we could help, we could avoid all of that extra part, right? We could avoid all those extra systems involvement with us just being able to do that within ourselves.
And that's the way it was back in the day, right? I mean, this system was created after colonization occurred, right? A system that did not honor the values of our Aina here. And when you look back in the day of our kupuna, we've talked about it many, many times, right? We had a system, right? We had the system of Hanai and Luhi, and our community cared for their children. The government did not care for our kids, right? We didn't rely on the government, I should say, to care for our kids. Because as you mentioned earlier, Laurie, the government isn't equipped to parent, but we are.
Yes.
And to your point, Kylene, to care for each other. It's not just about my kids, about, hey, I'm going to care for my kids, but I'm also going to help you care for yours, because we're all impacted, right? Yes. And seeing it as a community, a kauhale, a safe and nurturing place, a pu'uhonua. So I know we have, time flies, when you're having fun.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I've been having fun, and we're down to our last few minutes. So I want to ask you to, maybe Delia, we'll start with you, to just share some last thoughts. If you had anything to share about our conversation and the topic that we're talking about to the community, what is something that you would like to share with the community? And you can look right into the camera.
I'm gonna look at you. Well, I would urge you to learn more, to become involved. Go to epicohana.org, learn about the programs, learn about what you can do to support, where you might be interested, where you in your own community can give back, to serve, to work with young people, to work with families that have been involved. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small. We need foster parents or resource caregivers. We need people to attend these Malama Ohana meetings. We want to hear your voice. So come and learn more and come and join.
Yeah. Thank you, Delia.
Yep.
Kylene.
I would ditto what Delia says, but also whatever space you sit in, take the time to learn more, to build that pilina with those around you, because just that extra 5-10 minutes, you might know that a family needs something or your neighbor might need supports in something. And when we take those extra steps and the extra time to build pilina, we're really breaking down all those other walls, right? We're helping, and I think that's that's the main part for me, is go on the website, but also take time for ourselves to learn our community, learn our people, and really help each other.
Mahalo, Kylene. How about you, Laurie?
Ditto, ditto. I think, what we can do is rely on our strengths. And maybe we have to find again the strengths that are within ourselves and in our families. Every family has strength, but sometimes they have forgotten where that strength lies. So let's rekindle. And I'm very, very hopeful, especially with partners and with this work. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, mahalo, ladies, and thank you for sharing all the great work that you guys are doing, and the space that you're opening up for our community to join in. And I just want to end this session with saying, it's easy to criticize, right? When we hear of things that's happening out in our community, maybe children who are getting hurt, or maybe some of the injustices that's happening in our community. But before we jump to criticizing, let's get to understand what's really going on. And then rather than saying what they should be doing, ask yourself, what can I do? What can I do to help? What can I do to support? Because it's going to take all of us to change what's happening with our keiki and with our community. So in order for us to have a better, loving, aloha state of Hawaii, it's going to take all of us joining hands and making a difference to see it for our keiki. So mahalo for joining us. Thank you, ladies, for being here. And until next time, aloha nui, mahalo, malama pono. Take care.